friends, thanks for joining me again, and today I want to share with you something really personal. So we've talked about budgeting a lot and how, to stay on budget and different things like that, but I've never actually shared with you how we actually budget, so I really want to share that with you today. However, I want to mention really quick before we get started that I honestly don't think that this is the easiest way, it's not by any means the best way, and that there are a lot of different budgeting techniques, and so each person should do what works for them. So yeah, it just works for us, and I just wanted to share with you how we actually do it. So some of these I'm going to actually give numbers on, some of them I won't, obviously, but let's go ahead and get started. So let's start with our 3 accounts. We have 3 accounts that we actually use for our household expenses and stuff like that, just our household finance. So we have a savings account. It's actually a checking account, but I use it as a savings account. And this is money that we have set aside for a house down payment. So we know exactly how much we're going to be able to put for our house because this is how much we have in our savings account. We have a checking account which we use for everything, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But yeah, it's just our main checking account that we just do everything with. We have our debit cards on this account, and so that's what we actually use for a lot of things. And then we have an emergency account. So this is money that I have set aside for true emergencies, not like, oh, well, there's a birthday, or, we just needed something to do. Nothing like that. It's a true emergency account, like our basement floods, or somebody gets laid off and we need something to fall back on to keep, electricity on, that sort of stuff. This is money that we will only touch in a true emergency. So that's there. And then of course we have some credit cards, but we actually don't use those unless they're for small purchases, online stuff, that sort of thing, just to help us have a good credit score, which I believe is really important, as I've talked about before. But yeah, so we have those, but we pay them off every month. But these are the actual accounts that we actually have money in. And then we have funds. Funds are, for people who follow the Dave Ramsey plan, will know this as more like a sinking fund, but I just call them a fund. But it's just money that you would set aside and save for something, just something to save toward. So for us, we have 3 of them. We have a car fund, that car that's wheels have fallen off, that's the one we need to replace. And so right now we have $3,045 in that account that we have to buy a car with. We just added the $45 today, so that was kind of cool. I figured we would probably just spend $3,000 on our car, but I guess there's more in there now, so who knows, maybe that'll help out. Let's see, we have some money that I made from a plant sale back in spring. I have this money set aside so that we can either put a greenhouse on our new house or to put in some new landscaping in the new house, because I know if we move, we're going to want to do a lot of the same things that we have here. So I would like to plant some fruit trees and some berry bushes and some grapevines, that sort of thing, garden beds. So we're going to need some money for that, and so that's what I've decided to do, is keep that money we generated from gardening and selling plants toward more gardening and other plants, just to help kind of keep the whole thing as sustainable as possible. However, I know that this is nowhere near enough to achieve those goals. Maybe the landscaping, but certainly not a greenhouse. Appliances and furniture, we have set aside $326 for that. That's in case our new house needs, a dryer or a washer or a fridge or who knows what. And so those are our funds. Other people might, choose to have a fund for a wedding or a vacation or something like that. But we're not currently saving for anything like that, so we don't have that. But that's what the funds are. And then we have, out of our main checking account, I try to break it down to where we have money set aside for variable expenses and for fixed expenses. So fixed expenses are the ones that come up frequently, either every month, or maybe every 3 months, every 6 months, once a year. It depends on the expense, but they're usually pretty consistent amounts. Sometimes they'll go up year after year, but for the most part, they're pretty consistent, and they're pretty easy to predict what we're going to need set aside for that number. So this can include housing costs, depending on each person's situation. It may include, a mortgage, an HOA, maybe taxes, property taxes or homeowners insurance, that sort of stuff. Those would all fall in the housing category, so those are all fixed expenses. Car insurance, we buy that every 6 months. We have health insurance we have to pay for. We actually pay for that out of every paycheck. We have utilities, of course, that we have to pay once a month. We have car registrations. I have a small gym membership fee, which I use very regularly and enjoy very much. Just stuff like that. So there are lots of different fixed expenses. Some others that don't actually apply to us would be if somebody were to have like debts that they had to pay for, like credit cards, car payments, if they had childcare expenses that they have to pay every, whatever week, every 2 weeks, whatever it is, in order to work, those sorts of things. Subscriptions to any sort of, service or magazine or who knows what. But those kind of reoccurring costs are what I call fixed expenses. And then we have the variable expenses. These can change from week to week. So we have to, of course, budget for them. But clothing is important to budget for because clothes wear out. Gifts, they will come up in life. That just is part of it. Gas, of course, for our cars. Food and non-food, of course. Entertainment. Nobody wants to sit around and do nothing. Household items, just general there. Pets, other hobbies, and then, of course, restaurants, that sort of thing. So there are lots of different, maybe others that I don't have on this list, but this is just a general list of, different things that people may buy, every week or every few weeks or whatever. Just some variable expenses that can change depending on your life situation and what you have use for. So I know this looks like a lot of stuff just written on a paper. Let me show you what that actually looks like on a week-to-week or a paycheck-to-paycheck type of basis. So my husband and I do have combined finances. I do think that is what works for us, but I definitely think that that's not what should work or does work for everyone. It really depends on the situation and the scenario, but I feel like we're both on the same team, we're both working toward the same goal, and we're both very trustworthy, so I really don't find the need to separate it out. And we also have decided to basically live on one income. I feel like this is the safest way to do things because things can come up in life. Sometimes people, will want to have a child or, want to stay home with them. If you have two incomes and one person gets injured or one person gets laid off, if you have a two-income household and you're used to living on those two incomes, having one of them not be there can really be a painful thing to try to go through and endure. So having two paychecks or two incomes, I should say, and then only living on one of them makes us feel more safe. It makes us feel more secure and makes us feel like there's, a lot of just safety with that. So here we go. We have the wife's paycheck. That's me, obviously. All of the money that I make actually goes into savings, and this is going toward, again, our down payment on our house and that sort of thing. So we have that. And then my husband's paycheck, we actually break up into 3 different categories. We have a small category for savings, so we do put some of his money aside for savings as we can. We have a section of the money that I set aside for fixed expenses. So what we do is, if we have a housing cost, say, taxes, property taxes, we know that that comes up once a year. So what we'll actually do is set aside 1/26th of that money, because he gets paid every 2 weeks, 26 paychecks a year. So we'll set aside 1/26th of that money toward having the money to pay that later on. Our car insurance, that comes up every 6 months. We'll set aside 1/13th of whatever the total cost is per paycheck. And essentially what we're doing when we do that is setting aside the money that we need so that when that bill comes up, we have the ability to pay it. So we know what these, costs are. We know utilities, that comes up every month. So we save aside, what half of our utility would be on the first paycheck, half of the utility on the second, that sort of thing. So we set aside, we figured out how much we total need on all of those fixed expenses, and we set aside that total amount of money, and then as the bills come up, we just pay them as needed. So sometimes the bank account will go up and sometimes it'll go down depending on what kinds of, expenses we have come up. But this is something that you do have to reevaluate frequently, because sometimes the numbers can change. Your property taxes can go up, $50, $100 in 1 year, that sort of thing. So we have to reevaluate that to make sure that we're setting enough aside so that we always have enough for those bills. And then the last category, of course, would be for our variable spending. He gets paid, like I said, every other week. So we set, 2 sets of that aside so that we can actually budget week per week. And what we do is we have a certain dollar amount that we want to spend. We have the one set amount for all of the variable expenses. Now this is where it really gets different from the way that most people budget, because people who are on maybe a cash budget or, of some other system where it actually breaks it down per category, we're going to set aside, say, $50 for clothes, a paycheck, or, we need to set aside $30 for gas. We need, $150 for groceries. That's not the numbers we would actually use, but just saying, I've seen some budgets where they break it down that way. I really don't feel like we need that because we're pretty responsible. We're pretty, self-sufficient, and we pretty much know what our expenses are going to be. So what we will do is we'll have this certain dollar figure that we want to spend every week, or, that certain amount or less. And so what we'll do is we'll go to a store. Say a gas station, we'll buy gas. We'll go to another store. Walmart, we'll buy some cat litter and cat food and a few other non-foods. We'll go to another store and it'll be some groceries or whatnot. We add up the total amount that we spend throughout all of the stores or places that we'll go, and that total amount has to be less than the total amount that we want to spend each week. Because if we went over that amount, we know that we would be dipping into money that would have to go toward savings or other fixed expenses, and we don't want to make ourselves short on our bills, so we have to stay under that number. What this does is it gives us a lot of freedom to be able to change up things as we need to. So say there's a week where we really don't have any gifts we need to buy. Our kids don't have any birthdays, it's not a holiday season or anything like that. We don't have any friends or family that have any birthdays or whatnot, so maybe we can spend a little more on entertainment that week. There are other times when I've cut back the groceries a lot. Try and do what we can to eat as cheap as possible, and that's actually how I, upgraded the light fixture in our bathroom. You see what I'm saying? So as long as the total amount of money that we spend is under that amount, we know that our bills are always covered. So we can adjust the numbers that we need to on all of these categories as needed. So we can just kind of have the freedom to do whatever it is that we want to do. It's okay if we wanted to go out to a restaurant, but then we're going to have less money for food. You see what I'm saying? We don't usually eat out actually, but you get what I'm saying. So if we have, extra stuff we need for our pets, we just won't buy any clothes that week or whatever. We're not like we buy clothes that often anyway, but hopefully you get what I'm saying. We have certain numbers, a certain number that we try to spend, and then we always spend under that amount no matter how much we shop throughout the week, and we don't have to break up the numbers per category to where we actually have to, have stuff or money set aside for all of those things. We still have all of our expenses covered and everything like that. Really gives us a lot of freedom, like I said. That's why I like this budgeting technique. I really need freedom. That's something I really do need, otherwise I kind of freak out a little bit. So this gives us the freedom that we need. It makes it to where we have security and stability because we know all of our fixed expenses are always accounted for. We're never like worried or stressed that a bill comes up and then, you have to pay it and you don't have the money for it. And unlike the, paycheck to paycheck method, which is basically a paycheck and a due date, 1 week somebody's eating out at Red Lobster because they don't have any expenses that come up that week, but then the next week it's, a rent check, and so they need to pay all of their rent on that one check, so they basically go the whole week broke. And then the next week they get paid, and then it's back to Red Lobster because they don't have anything due. And then the next week comes and they have to pay car insurance and utilities on that check, and so it's back to being broke. Instead of having all those financial highs and lows, it makes it really steady to where we always have the money for the bills when we need them, and we always have our variable expenses covered too. That is how we budget our money. That's how we set aside money for funds and things like that, so we can always have, the bigger things covered, and yeah, that's how we actually spend our money and keep things as simple and easy as possible, and it just really works out well for us. So anyway, that's how we budget. Hopefully this video was helpful to you. I'm Frugal Gringo, and we'll see you next time.